The canyon walls loomed like silent guardians as Sarah Whitman stumbled upon the solitary figure. His weathered hands worked methodically, pulling something from the stone that caught the dying sunlight with an unusual hue. Not yellow gold, but a copper-pink shimmer that seemed to pulse with life. The Apache man didn't acknowledge her presence, continuing his labor as if driven by forces beyond mere survival. His scarred face revealed nothing, but his eyes held stories that made Sarah's breath catch. When she approached, he simply worked faster, more urgently. In the distance, dust clouds signaled riders approaching, men with maps and greed in their hearts. The Apache's hands bled as he dug deeper, revealing more of the sacred rose gold. Could this rare treasure truly heal the wounds that time had failed to mend? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah pressed herself against the canyon wall, heart hammering against her ribs. The approaching riders were still distant, but their intent was clear. Men didn't venture this deep into Arizona territory without purpose. The Apache man continued his work, seemingly unconcerned by their approach. "You should hide," she whispered, surprised by her own boldness. The man paused, obsidian eyes finally acknowledging her presence. His gaze traveled from her dust-covered boots to her wind-tangled hair before returning to the rose-hued stone in his bleeding hands. "Please," she added, pointing toward the riders. "They might not be friendly." With deliberate slowness, he gathered the fragments of copper-pink mineral into a leather pouch, then gestured toward a narrow fissure in the canyon wall. Sarah hesitated only a moment before following him into the shadowed opening. Inside, the fissure widened into a small cave. Cool air caressed her sun-scorched skin. The Apache man moved to the back wall, where he knelt beside a collection of supplies, a worn blanket, a cooking pot, simple tools. "My name is Sarah Whitman," she offered, voice echoing slightly against the stone. He remained silent, arranging his gathered minerals with careful precision. "Do you have a name?" she pressed. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice low and rough from disuse. "Nakohi." The word hung between them, a reluctant offering. Outside, hoofbeats approached. Nakohi moved swiftly to the cave entrance, signaling her to stay back. 3 white men on horseback reined in directly below their hiding place. From the shadows, Sarah could make out their conversation. "This is it. Matches the survey marks exactly." The lead rider, a corpulent man with a thick mustache, consulted a map. "Canyon opens wider half a mile south. Perfect place for the main operation." "What about the Indians?" asked another, nervously scanning the canyon walls. "Apache territory, ain't it?" The leader spat. "Reservations 30 miles east. Any strays are trespassing on soon-to-be company land." Sarah glanced at Nakohi, whose face remained impassive though his knuckles whitened around the knife at his belt. "Let's make camp at the wide spot," the leader decided. "Tomorrow we'll mark the best blast points." As the riders moved on, Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They're miners," she whispered. Nakohi nodded once, returning to his collection of rose gold. Now, in the dim light, Sarah could see that his hands bore old burn scars beneath the fresh cuts. "I'm heading to Tucson," she said, unsure why she felt compelled to share her plans with this silent stranger. "Lost everything in Chicago. The fire took my husband, my daughter." Her voice caught. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this." Nakohi paused, then reached for his canteen. It was beautifully crafted leather with tribal markings burned into its surface. He offered it to her, a small gesture of humanity in this harsh wilderness. "Thank you." The water was cool and sweet. "Those men, they'll be back with more. Whatever you're mining here, they'll take it." "Not mining," he corrected, his English surprisingly clear. "Gathering medicine." Sarah looked at the rose gold pieces, glimmering even in the cave's dimness. Medicine. Instead of answering, Nakohi moved to the cave entrance. The sun was setting, painting the canyon in deep oranges and purples. Night comes, he said simply. You stay. Not safe to travel. With that decree, he returned to his work, leaving Sarah to wonder what twist of fate had led her to this cave, this man, and the mysterious rose gold that seemed more precious than any treasure those miners sought. Night fell over the canyon, bringing a profound silence that Sarah had never experienced in Chicago. The cave's darkness was broken only by the small fire Nakohi had built, casting elongated shadows against ancient walls. While he worked methodically with his gathered rose gold, Sarah explored the cave system, finding it deeper than she'd initially thought. Her fingers traced the rough stone walls until they encountered something unexpected, indentations that seemed too regular to be natural. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light from the main chamber, she realized she was looking at petroglyphs, ancient drawings etched into the rock. Figures danced around spiral patterns, and at the center of one elaborate design was an unmistakable depiction of the rose-colored mineral Nakohi had been gathering. "How old are these?" she asked, returning to the fire. Nakohi glanced up. "Older than words." Sarah retrieved her worn journal from her travel pack and made a quick sketch of the petroglyphs by firelight. The leather-bound book had been her companion since leaving Chicago, filled with observations, pressed flowers, and memories she couldn't bear to lose. "Your hands need tending," she said, noticing fresh blood on the stones he worked. "It will pass." Sarah shook her head, retrieving a small tin of salve from her pack. "I was a nurse during the war." She held out her hand. "Please." After a moment's hesitation, he extended his scarred hands. As she gently applied the salve, Sarah noticed unusual markings on his forearm. Not tribal designs, but something else. "You were a scout," she said softly, recognizing the remnants of a military identification brand partly obscured by burned scars. Nakohi pulled his arm back. "Another life. You learned English to survive." His eyes reflected the firelight, revealing depths of pain Sarah recognized all too well. From her pack, Sarah produced a small worn photograph, a man and a little girl with ribbons in her hair. "James and Elizabeth, my husband and daughter." Her voice remained steady through practiced control. "The factory next to our home caught fire, spread too quickly." Nakohi's expression softened slightly. "The earth takes, the earth gives." He gestured to the rose gold pieces. "Apache believe this stone has spirit, healing spirit. Is that why you gather it?" "For healing." Instead of answering, Nakohi reached for something behind him. A stone mortar and pestle worn smooth with age. He placed a small piece of the rose gold in the mortar and began to grind it, creating a fine, shimmering powder. "The miners will return," Sarah said. "They'll bring equipment, more men." "I know. How much more do you need?" she asked, nodding toward the leather pouch now half filled with the rose gold fragments. "More. Many more." His rhythm with the pestle never faltered. Before the full moon, outside, the distant voices of the miners carried on the night air. They were establishing their camp, planning the destruction of this sacred place. Sarah's gaze fell on the ancient petroglyphs, then back to Nakohi's determined face illuminated by firelight. "Maybe I could help," she offered, surprising herself. "I'm good with my hands, quick to learn." Nakohi paused, studying her with those fathomless eyes. "I have nowhere to be," she added. "Not really." After a long moment, he nodded once. A solemn agreement that somehow felt more binding than any contract Sarah had ever signed. That night, as she lay wrapped in her thin blanket, Sarah added to her journal by the dying firelight. "Found shelter in more ways than one. Something about this place, these ancient walls, feels like a beginning rather than another stopping point. The Apache man, Nakohi, carries a burden I recognize. Perhaps we're both searching for something that can never be found." Or perhaps we've already found it. Dawn broke over the canyon in ribbons of amber and gold. Sarah woke to find Nakohi already outside, scanning the horizon where the miners' camp smoke rose in a thin gray line against the sky. She joined him at the cave entrance, her boots crunching on loose stone. "They're bringing wagons," he said without turning. "Heavy equipment. How long before they reach this section?" 3 days. Maybe 4. Sarah watched his profile, stoic, weathered by sun and wind, yet oddly vulnerable in the morning light. "You still haven't told me why this rose gold is so important. Why risk staying with them so close?" Nakohi was silent for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then he led her back inside to where the stone mortar sat beside the remnants of last night's fire. He added a pinch of something green to the powdered rose gold, a herb Sarah didn't recognize, then gestured for her to sit. "My grandmother told this story," he began, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality. "When Creator made the world, his tears fell where beauty touched sorrow. Where they landed, the stone turned the color of dawn." He worked the mixture with practiced movements as he spoke. "My people discovered these tears long ago. They hold power, healing power. Not just for body, for spirit." Sarah leaned closer, fascinated by both the story and the complex mixture he was creating. "As a boy, I saw an elder crushed by a fallen tree. His chest." Nakohi placed a hand over his own ribs. "Broken, breathing blood. The medicine woman made paste from these stones." 3 days later, he walked again. "That's impossible," Sarah said softly, medical training battling with the sincerity in Nakohi's eyes. "Many things seem impossible until seen." He looked up at her. "You saw Chicago burn. Impossible until it happened." The memory struck Sarah like a physical blow. The roaring inferno, buildings collapsing, Elizabeth's small hand slipping from hers in the panicked crowd. "I couldn't save them," she whispered. "Some wounds medicine cannot heal," Nakohi acknowledged. "But some it can." Outside, the sound of distant hammering carried on the wind. The mining operation was advancing. "Who are you trying to heal, Nakohi?" Sarah asked directly. He set down the mortar and reached inside his shirt, pulling out something Sarah hadn't noticed before. A small silver locket. Opening it, he revealed a portrait of a beautiful Apache woman. "Ayana, my wife." His voice caught slightly. "The sickness came last winter. White man's disease. Consumption." Sarah's heart sank. As a nurse, she knew tuberculosis was nearly always fatal. "The reservation doctor couldn't help? They sent us away. Too many sick, too little medicine." Bitterness edged his words. "Our medicine woman remembered the legend of the rose gold. Said if I could gather enough before the next full moon, when power is strongest." He closed the locket gently. "I was scout for bluecoats, betrayed my people. Now I must save her." Sarah stared at the shimmering powder in the mortar. Science told her it couldn't possibly cure consumption. Yet something about this place, this man's unwavering faith, made her wonder. "For days," she said finally. "How much more do you need?" Nakohi gestured to his small pile of rose gold fragments. 3 times this amount." Sarah thought of the approaching miners, the sacred canyon marked for destruction, the dying woman waiting for a miracle. "Then we'd better get started," she said, rolling up her sleeves. Nakohi studied her face, searching for mockery or deceit. Finding none, he handed her a small digging tool. Their fingers brushed, an unexpected connection that left Sarah momentarily breathless. "I'll show you where to look," he said, the faintest hint of hope warming his voice. The sun climbed high as Sarah and Nakohi worked side by side, chipping carefully at the canyon wall. Nakohi had shown her how to identify the telltale glimmer of rose gold veins in the stone. Slightly darker than copper, with an almost luminous quality when struck by direct sunlight. "Like this?" Sarah asked, holding up a small fragment. Nakohi examined it closely before nodding. Good eye. She dropped the piece into her gathering pouch, wincing as her unaccustomed hands protested the labor. Chicago society had left her ill-prepared for this work, but the skills she developed as a nurse, precision, patience, attention to detail, served her surprisingly well. We should move, Nakohi said suddenly, head tilting as he listened. Company men coming. They gathered their tools quickly, retreating to a narrow ledge higher up the canyon wall. Below, 2 surveyors passed, driving stakes with bright ribbons into the ground at regular intervals. Blasting markers, Nakohi whispered. They will destroy everything. The urgency in his voice matched the gravity in his eyes. Sarah realized that beyond Ayana's medicine, Nakohi was fighting to save something sacred, something that, once gone, could never be recovered. Tell me about her, Sarah said later as they worked a new section of the canyon. Your wife. Nakohi's hands stilled momentarily. Ayana is like sunrise, quiet strength, healer before the sickness came. How long have you been married? 7 summers. A rare smile softened his features. She saw me when others looked away. After what I did. Sarah sensed the weight of his past. The scouting. Nakohi nodded, returning to his work with increased intensity. I believed their promises. Better land. Protection. Instead, they used what I showed them. Attacked my people while they slept. The revelation hung in the air between them. Sarah thought of her own husband, James, who had fought for the Union believing in noble causes, only to return disillusioned by the realities of war. Sometimes we make choices thinking we're doing right, she offered, only to find we were wrong. My wrong cost lives. And now you're trying to save one. As the afternoon waned, they retreated to the cave with their day's collection. While Nakohi prepared the evening meal, a simple stew of dried meat and wild onions, Sarah organized their gathered rose gold by size. Their combined efforts had nearly doubled his original collection. Not enough, he said, eyeing their progress. Need more. Deeper veins. We could try the southern section tomorrow, Sarah suggested. I noticed similar rock formations there. A distant boom echoed through the canyon, the miners testing small charges. The sound made them both freeze, eyes meeting in shared concern. They move faster than I thought, Nakohi said. That night, as they sat by the small fire, Sarah noticed Nakohi reaching periodically for his locket, as if drawing strength from the connection to Ayana. In the firelight, his face revealed a vulnerability that his daytime stoicism concealed. You really believe this will save her? Sarah asked gently. I must believe. He looked up, his eyes reflecting the flames. What else remains when all else is taken? The question struck Sarah deeply. After Chicago, after losing everything, what had kept her moving westward? Not hope precisely, something more tenuous. A refusal to surrender to despair. Tomorrow we find more, she said with newfound determination. We'll save her, Nakohi. He studied her face for a long moment before reaching into his pack and removing a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. Unfolding it, he revealed a collection of healing herbs, treasures in this harsh landscape. For your hands, he said, offering them to her. Medicine works both ways. The simple gesture, this sharing of his precious resources, moved Sarah more than any grand declaration could have. As their fingers brushed during the exchange, she felt something shift between them, subtle as a change in the wind, yet undeniable. They were no longer merely 2 wounded souls sharing temporary shelter. They were partners in a mission that had somehow become hers as much as his. Dawn's first light found Sarah and Nakohi already working, having discovered a promising new vein in the southern canyon wall. The rose gold here seemed more concentrated, embedded in darker stone that required careful extraction. Like surgery, Sarah murmured, using her smaller hands to reach into a narrow crevice where a particularly rich deposit gleamed. Sometimes the most valuable things are the hardest to reach. Nakohi watched her technique with evident appreciation. You have good hands. Healer's hands. Field hospitals taught me precision, she replied, wincing at memories of amputations performed by lamplight, the screams of young men barely muffled by leather straps between their teeth. Though what you're doing with the rose gold, combining it with herbs, that's something I never learned in medical school. Your medicine and my people's medicine. Different paths to same destination. Nakohi carefully collected a large fragment she'd extracted. This one has strong energy. Feel it. He held the stone between them. Sarah hesitated before placing her fingertips against the rose-hued mineral. A subtle warmth radiated from it, though whether from the morning sun or something more mysterious, she couldn't say. I wonder, she began, then paused, unsure if her thoughts would offend him. Speak, he encouraged. In my medical training, we learned about elements that can affect the body. Copper, iron, mercury. Perhaps there's something in this rose gold that has genuine medicinal properties. Something science hasn't cataloged yet. Rather than dismissing her theory, Nakohi considered it thoughtfully. Perhaps Creator's tears hold many secrets, both for your science and my traditions. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of wagons. The mining operation was expanding. Working in companionable silence, they gathered what they could before retreating to higher ground as a survey team approached. From their vantage point, Sarah could see the full extent of the mining camp now, tents, equipment, wagons, and at least 20 men. A proper operation with serious backing. They'll start major blasting soon, she whispered. Nakohi nodded grimly. Tonight. We work night now. Safer. As they made their way back to the cave, Nakohi suddenly stopped, crouching to examine something on the ground. Sarah followed his gaze to a small collection of plants growing in a sheltered alcove. Healing herbs, he explained, carefully harvesting several sprigs. Rare. Good for fever. Sarah knelt beside him, noting the distinctive leaf pattern. We use willow bark for fever in Western medicine. The principal compound is similar to what we give in hospitals now. Show me how you would prepare it, he suggested. That afternoon, while waiting for darkness to cloak their mining activities, Sarah demonstrated how to create a tincture using the herbs and a small amount of alcohol from her medical kit. In turn, Nakohi showed her how his people prepared the same plant, drying it, then crushing it with specific ceremonial movements. The intention matters, he explained. Medicine needs purpose, direction. Sarah found herself absorbing his teachings without the skepticism she might have felt weeks ago. Chicago seemed a lifetime away, its concrete certainties increasingly remote compared to the visceral reality of this canyon, this man, this mission. As evening approached, Nakohi began grinding the day's collection of rose gold with his mortar and pestle. The repetitive motion had become a comforting ritual for both of them. Will you tell me something, Sarah? He asked unexpectedly. Of course. Your daughter. What was she like? The question caught her off guard, opening a door she usually kept firmly closed. Yet something about the quiet intimacy they developed made it possible to speak. Elizabeth was curious, always asking questions, fearless in a way I never was. Sarah smiled at the memory. She collected rocks, actually, pretty ones. Had them all along her windowsill. Nakohi nodded, continuing his rhythmic grinding. Children see beauty we forget to notice. Yes, Sarah whispered, surprised by the absence of the usual crushing pain that accompanied thoughts of Elizab. Instead, there was a bittersweet warmth. Yes, they do. Their eyes met across the small fire, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Two wounded healers working together toward something that might be impossible, yet somehow felt increasingly vital to them both. Night had become their ally. Under the cover of darkness, Sarah and Nakohi worked the richest veins they discovered, moving silently through the canyon like shadows. The miners' camp had grown quieter as most men slept, leaving only a few guards patrolling with lanterns. "We need to know their plans," Sarah whispered as they crouched behind a boulder, watching a guard pass by. "How much time we really have?" Nakohi nodded. "The fat one leader. His tent." He pointed to a large canvas structure at the center of the camp. "Papers there. I could create a distraction," Sarah suggested. "My clothes. I could pretend to be lost. A widow traveling to Tucson. Too dangerous." Nakohi's refusal was immediate, his hand closing protectively around her wrist. "It's not the first time I've had to navigate unwanted male attention." Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact. "Besides, we need to know." After considerable debate, they formed a plan. Sarah would approach the camp as a distressed traveler while Nakohi used the distraction to enter the leader's tent and examine any maps or documents. Sarah removed her dusty jacket and loosened her hair from its practical braid, allowing it to fall around her shoulders. She pinched her cheeks for color and deliberately smudged dirt on her skirt as if she'd fallen. 10 minutes, Nakohi said, concern evident in his eyes. "Then I come for you." The worry in his voice touched something in Sarah she'd thought long buried. She squeezed his hand briefly. "I'll be fine." Approaching the camp's edge, Sarah put on her best performance. "Hello? Is anyone there?" "Oh, thank heavens," she called as a guard spotted her. "Ma'am? What in tarnation are you doing out here alone?" The young guard looked both concerned and suspicious. "My wagon, broken axle. 2 miles back." Sarah forced tears into her eyes. "I've been walking for hours. Is there someone in charge I could speak with?" Soon she was seated by the main fire, a cup of coffee in her trembling hands, a genuine tremble. This plan was more nerve-wracking in execution than conception, surrounded by curious miners and their corpulent boss, Harold Benson. "Mighty strange to find a lady of quality wandering these parts alone, Mrs. Whitman," Benson said, his small eyes evaluating her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Widowhood forces strange circumstances, Mr. Benson," she replied. "I'm trying to reach my cousin in Tucson." As Sarah maintained their attention with her fabricated story, she caught glimpses of Nakohi's shadow moving behind the tents. Minutes stretched painfully as Benson moved from solicitous to suspicious. "Funny thing, Mrs. Whitman. My men have been patrolling this area for days. Not a sign of any wagon with a broken axle." Sarah's heart pounded. "Perhaps I'm turned around. It's been so frightening alone in the dark." Just as Benson was about to press further, a commotion erupted at the far end of camp. A supply tent had somehow caught fire. In the resulting chaos, Sarah slipped away, rushing to the rendezvous point where Nakohi waited, clutching several papers. "We must hurry," he whispered, taking her hand as they disappeared into the darkness. Back in their cave, Nakohi spread out his stolen prize, a detailed survey map marked with dozens of red X's. "Blasting points," he said grimly, "all through canyon. Tomorrow they begin." Sarah studied the map in horror. "There are charges marked everywhere, even directly above our cave system. They will destroy everything. All the rose gold, the sacred sites." Sarah traced the blasting pattern with her finger. "This isn't just mining, Nakohi. This is complete destruction." She looked up at him, seeing the conflict in his eyes. "You need to warn your people. The reservation isn't far enough away for this scale of blasting." Nakohi stared at the map, his face a study in anguish. "If I go now, I abandon Ayana's medicine. If you stay, your people could be hurt when the canyon walls collapse." The tension between them crackled like the small fire illuminating the stolen map. Two imperatives, both impossible to ignore, both demanding immediate action. "There must be a way to do both," Sarah insisted, unwilling to accept that their quest for Ayana's cure would endanger others. "No time." Nakohi's voice was hollow. "Moon comes full in 3 nights. Blasting begins tomorrow. Then we fight back," Sarah said, surprising herself with her vehemence. We slow them down. Nakohi looked at her as if seeing her anew. Why do you care so much? Not your people. Not your wife. The question hung between them, demanding an honesty Sarah hadn't permitted herself until this moment. Because for the first time since Chicago, I'm fighting for something instead of running from everything, she answered softly. And because I can't bear to see you lose what matters most. First light brought the sounds of men and machinery moving into position. Time was running out. Sarah and Nakohi worked with urgent precision, processing their gathered rose gold into medicine. We have enough for first treatment, Nakohi said, carefully mixing the powdered mineral with herbs in the stone mortar. Not complete cure, but beginning. Sarah watched his methodical movements, her medical mind still struggling to reconcile his traditional knowledge with her scientific training. In Western medicine, we often administer treatments in stages. Perhaps this first batch could stabilize Ayana while we gather more. Nakohi nodded. Wise approach. He added a few drops of clear spring water to the mixture, creating a paste with the consistency of thick honey. Now, final element. To Sarah's surprise, Nakohi used his knife to make a small cut on his palm, allowing several drops of blood to fall into the mixture. The medicine must know who it heals, he explained, seeing her startled expression. Connection between healer and healed. Sarah recalled how personal many traditional remedies were, medicines compounded specifically for individual patients rather than mass-produced like the newer pharmaceuticals gaining popularity back east. May I? She asked, holding out her hand for his knife. Nakohi hesitated, then handed it to her. Sarah made a small cut on her own palm, adding her blood to the mixture. Two healers are stronger than one. Something flickered in Nakohi's eyes. Surprise, followed by deep appreciation. Together they worked the mixture, their blood mingling with the rose gold and herbs until it formed a small cake that Nakohi carefully wrapped in leaves. This will keep 3 days, he said, placing it in a specially constructed medicine pouch decorated with beadwork. Long enough to reach Ayana, and long enough for us to disrupt those blasting plans. Sarah unfolded the stolen map again. They're starting at the south end, working north. That gives us a small advantage. While Nakohi finished preparing the medicine pouch, Sarah inventoried the contents of her medical bag. Alcohol, bandages, iodine solution. She paused, holding up a small brown bottle. Ipecac. Induces vomiting. Useful. Very. A few drops in their coffee would create quite a distraction. Sarah's normally compassionate nature had been tempered by the threat to both Nakohi's wife and the sacred canyon. It won't cause lasting harm, just inconvenience. Nakohi's rare smile appeared briefly. You have warrior spirit, Sarah Whitman. As they prepared, Sarah explained basic principles of the mining explosives based on what she'd learned during the war. They'll use blasting caps connected to a detonator. If we can disconnect even a few of those caps, they must recheck, reset. Wastes time. Exactly. By midday, they had developed a two-part plan. First, sabotage the initial blasting site to delay operations. Second, create enough confusion in camp to allow Nakohi to send a smoke signal warning to his people about the danger. Before leaving the cave, Nakohi opened a small bundle he'd kept separate from their other supplies. Inside was a beautifully crafted medicine pouch, more elaborate than the one he'd just prepared. For you, he said, holding it out to Sarah. Protection. She accepted it with genuine reverence, feeling the weight of its significance. Inside were herbs, a small carved stone, and a pinch of rose gold powder. It's beautiful, Nakohi. Thank you. Medicine works many ways. He placed it gently around her neck. Healing, protection, connection. Their eyes met as the pouch settled against her heart. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed, unexpected and profound. The moment was interrupted by a distant explosion, smaller than a full blast, likely a test charge. The mountains seemed to tremble in response. "They begin," Nakohi said, gathering their sabotage supplies. "We must move now." As they prepared to leave the safety of their cave, Sarah found herself reaching for Nakohi's hand. He clasped hers firmly, their shared blood sacrifice forming an invisible bond between them. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "I'm glad I found you mining rose gold that day." Nakohi's response was simple but filled with meaning. "The canyon brought you when needed most." Then they slipped out into the afternoon sun, two unlikely allies united against forces that threatened to destroy not just sacred stone, but a last hope for healing and redemption. Dusk provided the cover they needed. Sarah and Nakohi moved silently toward the southern blasting site, dodging patrols of miners preparing for the next day's explosion. Their plan was simple but dangerous: disable enough blasting caps to delay the operation without being discovered. "There," Nakohi whispered, pointing to a collection of wooden crates partially covered by canvas. "Explosives." Sarah nodded, heart pounding as they crept closer. The main camp was alive with activity. Men eating dinner, playing cards, discussing the next day's work. Only 2 guards patrolled the explosives cache, making regular rounds every 15 minutes. "We wait," Nakohi instructed as they concealed themselves behind a rocky outcropping. "Next patrol passes, we move." The waiting was excruciating. Pressed close together in their hiding spot, Sarah could feel Nakohi's steady breathing, the warmth of him a stark contrast to the desert night's growing chill. His proximity awakened feelings she'd thought buried with James, an awareness that both comforted and unsettled her. "Guards coming," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. They flattened themselves against the rock as lantern light approached. The guards passed so close that Sarah could smell tobacco and whiskey. One paused, momentarily, and her breath caught. "You hear something, Pete?" the guard asked, lifting his lantern higher. "Just coyotes," his companion replied. "Come on, let's finish the round." Cook's made apple cobbler. As the light receded, Sarah realized she'd been clutching Nakohi's arm. She released it with a whispered apology. "No apology needed," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar softness. They seized their opportunity, slipping from cover to the explosives cache. Sarah's knowledge from treating wounded miners during the war proved invaluable as she identified the crucial connections to disable. "Cut these wires," she instructed, pointing to the primary detonation lines. "Remove every third blasting cap." Working in near darkness, they systematically sabotaged the carefully laid explosives. Nakohi's deft hands moved with surprising precision for a man more accustomed to mining than mechanical sabotage. A sudden shout from camp sent them diving behind the crates. A group of miners was heading their way. "Something spooked the horses," one called. "Check the south perimeter." "No escape," Nakohi whispered, scanning their surroundings. The approaching lanterns would expose them in moments. "There," Sarah pointed to a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. Without hesitation, they squeezed into the tight space, pressing back into shadow as miners passed just feet away. The crevice was barely wide enough for one person. Nakohi positioned himself protectively in front, his back against Sarah's chest, her face pressed between his shoulder blades. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady despite the danger. "They will pass soon," he whispered, though they both knew the miners might search for some time. In that confined space with death or capture so near, something shifted between them. The pretenses and barriers that remained fell away like autumn leaves. "If we don't survive this," Sarah whispered, "I need you to know something." She felt Nakohi go still, listening. "After Chicago, I wasn't just traveling to Tucson. I was running away. From the memories. From the guilt." Her voice caught. "I was a nurse. I should have saved them. The fire was not your doing," Nakohi said softly. No, but I froze. When it mattered most, I hesitated. The confession poured from her like long festering poison from a wound. In the panic, I let go of Elizabeth's hand, just for a moment, but it was enough. Nakohi's hand found hers in the darkness, fingers interlacing. I guided soldiers to my own people's camp, he said, his voice a painful whisper. Believed they wanted peace talks. Instead, they attacked at dawn. Women, children. The enormity of his guilt matched her own. Two souls carrying unbearable burdens. After my people cast me out, only Ayana stood by me, said my heart remained true despite my actions. His voice cracked with emotion. Now the spirits punish her for my sins. Sarah pressed her forehead against his back, her tears dampening his shirt. No, Nakohi. Illness is not punishment. It's just life's cruelty. Then why her? Why not me? The raw pain in his question broke something open inside Sarah. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him from behind, holding him as his body silently shook. I don't know, she whispered, but we'll fight it together. In that moment of shared vulnerability, trapped in darkness with danger all around, something beautiful and fragile bloomed between them. A connection forged in shared grief and unexpected hope. The search continued outside their hiding place, lanterns swinging, voices calling. But within their sheltered crevice, a different kind of light had kindled, one that neither had dared hope to find again. Dawn broke with shouts of anger echoing through the canyon. Sarah and Nakohi, safely back in their cave after a night of sabotage, exchanged glances of grim satisfaction as the mining foreman's curses carried on the morning air. They've discovered our handiwork, Sarah said, peering cautiously from the cave entrance. Below, miners swarmed around the explosives cache, examining the damaged detonation lines and missing blasting caps. The corpulent Benson was red-faced with rage, berating his men while gesturing wildly at the canyon walls. He says sabotage, Nakohi translated, his hearing keener than Sarah's. Blames his own men. Thinks someone taking bribes from rival company. That buys us time, Sarah said. But they'll repair the damage quickly. We need to do more. They spent the morning gathering the last accessible rose gold while the miners focused on repairing their equipment. By midday, Nakohi had created a second, smaller batch of medicine to combine with the first. Still not enough, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Need deeper veins. The ones behind the waterfall? Sarah suggested. You said they were the richest. Nakohi nodded. But miners watch that area now. Too dangerous. Not if they're distracted. Sarah reached into her medical bag, producing the small brown bottle of ipecac. Tonight, I'll visit their camp again. The distressed widow seeking help. A few drops of this in their evening stew. No. Nakohi's refusal was immediate. Too dangerous. Benson suspects already. Do we have a choice? The full moon is tomorrow night. Their debate was interrupted by a new commotion from the mining camp. A wagon had arrived, loaded with more sophisticated equipment. Among the new arrivals was a man in a tailored suit, clearly someone of importance. Company man, Nakohi said grimly. From the city. They're accelerating their timeline, Sarah realized. We act tonight or lose everything. As darkness fell, they put their desperate plan into motion. Using Sarah's medical kit and Nakohi's knowledge of local plants, they created several bundles of herbs that, when burned, would produce disorienting smoke. Sarah also prepared her ipecac solution in a small flask that could be quickly emptied into the miner's coffee pot. Approaching the camp required more caution than before. The miners had posted additional guards, and dogs now patrolled the perimeter. Nakohi led Sarah on a circuitous route, using the skills that had once made him a valued army scout to avoid detection. Remember, he whispered as they crouched behind a supply wagon. 3 smoke signals when safe to approach waterfall. Sarah nodded, clutching the flask in sweating palms. Be careful. You also. His hand briefly cupped her cheek, a gesture so tender it momentarily stole her breath. They separated, Sarah slipping toward the mess tent while Nakohi circled toward the waterfall where the richest rose gold deposits remained. The plan was simple. Sarah would create a distraction allowing Nakohi to mine undetected. Then they would rendezvous at their cave before dawn. The mess tent was quiet, most miners having finished their evening meal. Only the cook remained, cleaning up while a pot of coffee brewed for the night shift. Sarah waited until he stepped outside for a smoke, then darted inside. She had just emptied the ipecac into the coffee when a voice froze her in place. Well, well, our mysterious widow returns. Benson stood in the tent opening, his small eyes gleaming with malice. Behind him loomed two guards. I was just looking for help, Sarah stammered, falling back on her practice story. My wagon. Save it, Benson snapped. We found woman's boot prints by the sabotaged explosives. About your size, I'd wager. Sarah backed away, searching desperately for an escape route. I don't know what you're talking about, and I think you're in league with that Apache we've spotted skulking around. Benson advanced slowly, probably stealing our survey data, planning to file a claim yourselves. Sarah's hand closed around a heavy iron ladle on the cook's table. When Benson lunged forward, she swung with all her strength, catching him across the temple. He staggered, cursing, as she bolted past him into the night. Get her, he roared. Sarah ran, not toward the cave but in the opposite direction, hoping to draw pursuit away from Nakohi. Behind her, shouts and barking dogs indicated the chase was on. She clutched the medicine pouch around her neck, praying for the protection Nakohi had promised it would provide. A gunshot cracked through the night, and searing pain bloomed across Sarah's arm. She stumbled but kept running, the canyon walls rising around her like ancient protectors as blood soaked her sleeve and the hunters closed in. Sarah stumbled through the darkness, one hand clamped over her bleeding arm, the other pushing aside branches and brush. The shouts of pursuers had faded, but she dared not return to the cave yet, not while they were still searching. Dawn was hours away, and the night air had turned bitter cold. Finding a sheltered hollow beneath an overhanging rock, Sarah collapsed, breathing heavily. The bullet had only grazed her upper arm, but the wound bled freely. She tore a strip from her petticoat and bound it tightly, wincing at the pain. Nakohi, she whispered into the darkness, hoping against reason that he was safe, that he'd managed to gather more rose gold while she'd drawn away the search party. As her racing heart slowed, Sarah became aware of voices carrying on the night air, not from the direction of her pursuers, but from a small clearing barely visible through the brush. Cautiously, she crept forward. In the clearing stood a well-appointed tent illuminated from within. Through the partially open flap, she could see the company man who had arrived that afternoon. He was speaking to Benson, who held a bloodied handkerchief to his temple where Sarah's ladle had struck him. I don't care about your excuses, Benson, the company man said, his cultured Eastern accent carrying clearly. The first shipment of explosives for the main blast arrives tomorrow. We begin full operations at dawn the following day. But sir, Mr. Hargrove, the sabotage is your problem to solve. Hire more guards. Shoot trespassers on sight. I want this canyon cleared and mining underway before those Apache from the reservation can file any more complaints with the Indian agent. Sarah froze at the name. Hargrove. Edmund Hargrove. The name was burned into her memory as surely as the Chicago fire had burned her world to ash. Sliding a hand into her pocket, she withdrew a folded newspaper clipping she'd carried since leaving Chicago. In the dim moonlight, she could just make out the headline, Hargrove Textile Factory Fire Claims 27 Lives. And there, in the accompanying photograph, stood the same man, younger but unmistakable, denying responsibility for the faulty equipment that had sparked the inferno. The factory beside their home, The fire that had taken James and Elizabeth. The man whose negligence had destroyed her life was here, preparing to destroy Nakohi's sacred canyon. Sarah's blood ran cold, then hot with a rage so pure it momentarily eclipsed her pain. Her fingers crushed the clipping as memories flooded back. The heat, the screams, Elizabeth's small hand slipping from hers in the panicked crowd, James running back into the flames to find their daughter. "We've had reports of an Apache man in the area," Hargrove was saying, "probably trying to claim mineral rights. Find him. Remove him. The last thing we need is legal complications." "And the woman?" Benson asked. "A minor inconvenience. Deal with her." Sarah retreated silently, mind racing. This was no longer just about helping Nakohi gather medicine for Ayanna. It was about justice for her family, for the Apache people, for the sacred canyon itself. Moving as quietly as her injured arm allowed, Sarah circled away from the camp, heading toward the waterfall where Nakohi had planned to mine. The 3 smoke signals they'd agreed upon were too risky now, with searchers combing the canyon. She would have to find him another way. The waterfall came into view, silver in the moonlight. Sarah approached cautiously, alert for any sign of miners or Nakohi. The area appeared deserted, the only sound the gentle splash of water on stone. "Nakohi?" she whispered, scanning the shadows. A hand emerged from darkness, covering her mouth as another arm pulled her behind the waterfall's curtain. She struggled briefly until Nakohi's familiar voice reached her ears. "Sarah. Safe now." The small cave behind the waterfall was lit by a single candle stub. In its glow, Sarah could see Nakohi's concerned expression as he noticed her bloodied sleeve. "They shot you," he said, immediately reaching for her makeshift bandage. "It's just a graze." She caught his hand. "Nakohi, listen to me. The company man, his name is Edmund Hargrove. He owned the factory that burned in Chicago. The fire that killed my family." Nakohi's expression shifted from concern to understanding. "The past circles back." "Yes." Sarah withdrew the crumpled newspaper clipping, smoothing it in the candlelight. "And now he's here to destroy your canyon, your medicine source." Nakohi studied the clipping, then looked back at Sarah. "What does your heart say?" "That I want him to pay," she admitted, the words like hot coals on her tongue. "That I want justice." His eyes held hers steadily. Justice or vengeance? The question struck her deeply. Before she could answer, Nakohi gestured to the back of the small cave, where Sarah saw something that drove all thoughts of Hargrove temporarily from her mind. "Rose gold," she breathed. "So much of it." The wall behind the waterfall glittered with the richest vein they'd yet discovered, copper pink in the candlelight, pulsing with possibility. Dawn found Sarah and Nakohi working feverishly behind the waterfall, extracting more rose gold than they had found in all their previous efforts combined. The rich vein yielded easily to their tools, as if the earth itself had decided to surrender its treasure. "The spirits guide us," Nakohi said, carefully placing another large fragment into their collection pouch. "They know time grows short." Sarah's arm throbbed beneath its fresh bandage. Nakohi had treated the wound with a poultice of herbs that numbed the pain and stemmed the bleeding. Despite her injury, her fingers worked deftly, prying loose the precious mineral that might save Ayanna's life. "We have enough," Nakohi announced finally, weighing the leather pouch in his palm. "Enough for full medicine." Relief washed over Sarah, quickly followed by new anxiety. "But how do we get it to her? The miners are searching everywhere." Nakohi's face, normally so stoic, showed rare animation. "We send message. Call for help." He led Sarah out of their hiding place, taking a circuitous route to avoid the mining camp. The miners' search had concentrated near the main camp and the sabotaged explosive site, leaving the higher elevations relatively unguarded. On a high ridge overlooking both the canyon and the distant reservation lands, Nakohi gathered specific types of wood and brush. Working methodically, he arranged them in a precise pattern. Apache talking without words, he explained as he worked. Smoke signals. Different smoke, different message. Sarah watched, fascinated, as he built a small platform of stones, then arranged his gathered materials on top. What will you tell them? That we have medicine. That canyon faces destruction. That we need escort for safe passage. He hesitated, then added, and that I bring white ally, a healer. The designation warmed something in Sarah's heart. From suspicious stranger to ally, the journey had been as transformative for her identity as it had been for their relationship. Show me, she requested. With patient hands, Nakohi demonstrated how different materials created different colors and densities of smoke. How timing the release by covering and uncovering the fire with a blanket created distinct patterns. How messages had been passed this way among his people for generations, a language written on the sky itself. Now we send, he said, striking a spark to the carefully arranged materials. As the fire caught, he manipulated the smoke with practiced movements, sending billowing white puffs into the clear morning air. Sarah held her breath, watching the message rise toward the cloudless sky, carrying their hope and urgency across miles of desert to Nakohi's people. Will they understand? Will they come? She asked when he finished, smothering the fire carefully to leave no trace. They will understand. Nakohi scanned the distant horizon. Whether they come depends on many things. They waited, the sun climbing higher, bringing with it the day's heat. After what felt like hours, a response appeared, 3 distinct columns of smoke rising from the direction of the reservation. Nakohi's body tensed as he read the reply. They received our message. And his face fell slightly. Ayana cannot travel. Too weak now. Sarah's heart sank. They won't bring her? They will send warriors to escort us. But he turned to Sarah, his eyes reflecting painful truth. We must go to her. Leave Canyon. The implications hung between them. Leaving meant abandoning the sacred site to destruction. Staying meant the medicine might come too late for Ayana. When will they arrive? Sarah asked. Tomorrow, near sunset. Another distant boom echoed through the canyon, the miners testing more explosives. Time was running out on all fronts. Then we have until tomorrow to gather as much rose gold as we can, Sarah decided. And to stop Hargrove. Nakohi studied her face. Vengeance will not heal your wounds, Sarah. This isn't about vengeance anymore, she replied, though part of her questioned whether this was entirely true. It's about stopping him from destroying something irreplaceable. For your people. For future generations. The sun reached its zenith as they made their way back toward the waterfall. Below, the mining camp bustled with activity. More wagons arriving, more men and equipment assembling for the canyon's destruction. One day, Sarah said suddenly, I'd like to see where you live. Meet Ayana. The simple statement carried the weight of a much larger confession, that she was beginning to imagine a future beyond this canyon, beyond her quest for a new life in Tucson, a future that somehow included Nakohi. He did not reply, but his hand found hers as they walked, fingers intertwining in silent acknowledgement of the unspoken possibility between them. Evening shadows stretched across the canyon as Sarah and Nakohi sat outside their cave, facing the impossible choice before them. The completed medicine pouch rested between them, containing enough rose gold mixture to treat Ayana. The warriors would arrive tomorrow at sunset to escort them back to the reservation. If we leave, Sarah said, watching the mining camp below, Hargrove will destroy everything. All the remaining rose gold, the petroglyphs, the sacred sites. Nakohi nodded, his face grave. If we stay to fight, Ayana may die waiting for medicine. The weight of the decision pressed on them both. Sarah understood Nakohi's torment, to choose between his wife and his heritage, between immediate healing and preservation for future generations. What if we split up? she suggested suddenly. I could take the medicine to Ayana while you stay to oppose the mining. Too dangerous for you alone, Nakohi objected immediately. Miners hunt you now. And reservation. He hesitated. Some there blame white people for all suffering. Would not welcome you. Then you go, Sarah countered. Take the medicine to your wife. I'll stay and do what I can to delay the destruction. The look Nakohi gave her made Sarah's heart tighten. You would do this? Risk yourself for canyon that is not yours. It is mine now, she said softly. At least it matters to me now. Nakohi rose, collecting a handful of loose sand. In a flat area beside their fire, he began to draw with his finger, a map of sorts with two diverging paths. This path, he traced a line toward the east, leads to reservation, to Ayana, to healing what can be healed. His finger moved to the second path, circling the canyon. This path means fighting Hargrove, maybe stopping destruction, maybe not. The two paths stood stark in the sand between them. Two futures, two imperatives, both urgent, both sacred in their own way. There must be another choice, Sarah insisted, unwilling to accept that either Ayana or the canyon must be sacrificed. What if? She paused, mind racing. What if we send a message asking your people to bring Ayana partway? To a meeting point? We could finish gathering rose gold tonight. Then one of us could take it to her while the other stays to oppose the blasting. Nakohi considered this, adding a third path to his sand map, one that branched and then reconnected. Possible, he admitted, but still dangerous. And who stays? Who goes? The question hung between them. Sarah thought of Hargrove, of her burning desire to confront the man responsible for her family's death. She thought of Ayana, whom she'd never met but had come to care about through Nakohi's love for her. We decide tomorrow, Nakohi said finally. Tonight, we gather more medicine. For future. They worked through the night, returning to the rich vein behind the waterfall. Each piece of rose gold they extracted felt like an act of defiance against Hargrove, a promise to generations yet unborn that this sacred medicine would not be lost forever. As they worked, Sarah found herself studying Nakohi's face in the dim light. The strong lines of his cheekbones, the quiet determination in his eyes, the occasional softness around his mouth when he spoke of Ayana or his people's traditions. She had come to rely on his steady presence, his wisdom, his quiet strength. The thought of separating tomorrow, of him returning to his wife while she faced Hargrove alone, created an ache she hadn't anticipated. Nakohi, she said as dawn approached, no matter what we decide, about who goes and who stays, I want you to know that finding you, learning about the rose gold, it healed something in me that I thought would always remain broken. In the gathering light, his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The canyon brings what is needed, he said simply, for both of us. As the sun rose, they sent another smoke signal, this time requesting that warriors bring Ayana as far as her strength would allow, to a meeting point halfway between the canyon and the reservation. Whether the tribe would agree remained to be seen. Below, the mining camp stirred to life. More wagons had arrived during the night. Time was running out. We will find a way, Sarah said with determined conviction, to save both Ayana and the canyon. Nakohi's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. Together, he agreed, the single word carrying the weight of a vow. Midday brought their answer, a single column of smoke rising from the distant horizon. The tribe had agreed to their compromise. Ayana would be brought as far as her condition allowed, to meet Nakohi the following evening. She comes, Nakohi said, relief softening his features momentarily before concern returned. But main blasting begins tomorrow at noon. Then we need to do more than just delay, Sarah said, determination hardening her voice. We need to stop Hargrove completely. They retreated to their cave to formulate a plan, spreading the stolen survey map between them. Sarah studied the marked blasting points, her mind working through possibilities. The explosives are placed to create a controlled collapse, she observed. Each charge depends on the others. If we could disable the main detonator. Guards watch equipment now, Nakohi reminded her. After sabotage. Yes, but they don't know who I am, Sarah said. Benson suspects, but Hargrove has never seen me. A plan began forming in her mind. What if I posed as a journalist? Or a potential investor? Created a distraction while you secured the detonator. Nakohi considered this. Dangerous, but possible. As they refined their strategy, Sarah noticed Nakohi repeatedly touching the medicine pouch containing the rose gold preparation. His concern for Ayana was evident in every gesture, every glance toward the eastern horizon. You should leave now, she said suddenly. Take the medicine to the meeting point. Don't risk waiting. And leave you alone to face Hargrove? Nakohi shook his head firmly. No, I can handle Hargrove. Not alone. Their eyes met in silent challenge, neither willing to abandon the other. Finally, Sarah sighed. We stick to the plan, then. Together until sunset tomorrow. As afternoon waned, they prepared. Using materials from Sarah's medical bag and items gathered from the canyon, they created simple but effective tools for their mission. Nakohi fashioned smoke bombs that would create confusion without causing harm. Sarah prepared a sedative solution from her medical supplies that could incapacitate guards if necessary. We need to know exactly where the main detonator is kept, Sarah said. I'll scout the camp tonight. Too dangerous, Nakohi objected. They're looking for an Apache man and a woman together. A lone woman might go unnoticed, especially if I alter my appearance. After much debate, they agreed Sarah would conduct a brief reconnaissance mission near dusk, when the changing light would provide additional cover. Nakohi would remain nearby, ready to intervene if needed. As they waited for evening, Nakohi completed the final preparations of Ayana's medicine. Sarah watched his precise movements, the careful grinding and mixing, the whispered prayers in his native tongue. You really love her, Sarah said softly. Nakohi looked up, his eyes reflecting complex emotions. She is my heart. A pang of something, not quite jealousy, but a wistful longing, passed through Sarah. She's fortunate to be so loved. All deserve such love, he replied, his gaze holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. The simple statement lingered between them as they made final preparations. Sarah tied her hair back severely and smudged her face with dirt to change her appearance. Nakohi helped her create a makeshift sling for her injured arm, both for support and as part of her disguise. As dusk approached, they moved toward the mining camp. From their vantage point, they could see Hargrove standing with Benson near a large tent, examining papers spread on a portable table. That must be where they keep the plans, Sarah whispered. And likely the detonator as well. Be careful, Nakohi said, his hand closing briefly around hers. Return at first sign of danger. Sarah nodded, then slipped away, circling around to approach the camp from the opposite direction. Adopting a limping gait and hunching her shoulders, she transformed herself into a seemingly harmless older woman. As she neared the perimeter, a guard stepped forward. Halt! Who goes there? Please, sir, Sarah called in a quavering voice unlike her own. My wagon, broken wheel, just need help. The guard hesitated, then stepped closer, lantern raised. Ma'am, this is a private mining operation. You shouldn't be out here alone. So kind, Sarah mumbled, stumbling slightly to draw him closer. As he reached to steady her, she noted the layout of the camp, focusing particularly on Hargrove's tent. Through its open flap, she could see a wooden box on the table, exactly the type used to house detonation equipment. The guard was growing suspicious. Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to. A distant noise, Nakohi's diversion, drew the guard's attention momentarily. Sarah used the opportunity to slip away, fading into the gathering darkness before he could pursue. Rejoining Nakohi in their hiding place, she shared what she'd seen. The detonator is in Hargrove's tent. Heavily guarded, but not impossible to reach. As night fully claimed the canyon, they finalized their plan. A dangerous gambit that would require perfect timing and more than a little luck. Tomorrow, Nakohi said, looking toward the eastern horizon where Ayana would be approaching. Then back to the mining camp where destruction waited to be unleashed. Everything changes. One way or another, Sarah agreed, her thoughts on Hargrove, on justice long denied, on a future suddenly uncertain yet filled with possibility. Dawn broke over the canyon with ominous efficiency. Miners already positioning equipment, foremen shouting orders, wagons delivering the final explosives. Sarah and Nakohi watched from their hiding place as Hargrove himself inspected the blasting sites, his tailored suit incongruous against the rugged landscape. Time has come, Nakohi said, checking the position of the sun. Ayana reaches meeting point by sunset. We must act now. For a moment, they stood facing each other, the gravity of what they were about to attempt hanging between them. Without warning, Nakohi reached into his shirt and removed a small object, the completed rose gold medicine. Take this, he said, pressing it into Sarah's palm. If I fail, you must bring to Ayana. Sarah's fingers closed around the precious pouch. We won't fail. Always two paths, Nakohi reminded her. Must be ready for both. With this solemn exchange, they separated for the first time since Sarah had discovered Nakohi mining rose gold days earlier. The plan required them to approach from different directions, Sarah to create a diversion by confronting Hargrove directly, while Nakohi used the distraction to disable the main detonator. Sarah circled wide around the camp, approaching from the main access road as if she were an expected visitor. She had transformed herself again, using items from her medical bag to appear more refined. Hair neatly pinned, face cleaned, posture straight and confident despite her injured arm in its sling. Two guards blocked her path at the camp's entrance. Ma'am, this is a restricted area. I'm well aware, Sarah replied with practiced authority. I'm here to see Mr. Hargrove. Western Mining Consortium business. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Don't recall Mr. Hargrove mentioning any visitors. That's because Mr. Hargrove doesn't inform subordinates of board-level discussions. Sarah fixed them with an imperious stare. Now, will you announce me, or shall I report this obstruction to the directors in Boston? The bluff worked. One guard hurried toward Hargrove's tent while the other remained watching Sarah warily. Minutes later, she was escorted into the heart of the camp, each step taking her closer to the man responsible for her family's death. Hargrove stood beside a table covered with maps and technical drawings, his back to the entrance. This is highly irregular, he said without turning. All investor meetings were scheduled for next month in San Francisco. I'm not an investor, Mr. Hargrove. He turned at the sound of her voice, eyebrows rising slightly. Then who, may I ask, are you? My name is Sarah Whitman. She watched his face for any sign of recognition, but saw none. Perhaps you remember the Whitman family? We lived next to your Chicago textile factory, the one that burned 3 years ago. Hargrove's expression remained impassive. I'm afraid that doesn't. The fire killed 27 people, including my husband and daughter. Sarah's voice remained steady, though her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. The investigation found faulty wiring in your building. Wiring you were ordered to replace months earlier. A flicker of unease crossed Hargrove's face. That was an unfortunate accident. The investigation was inconclusive. Because you paid the inspector. Sarah took a step forward. Just like you're probably paying officials to ignore Apache claims to this canyon. Hargrove's momentary uncertainty hardened into annoyance. I don't know what you think you're doing, Mrs. Whitman, but this is a legal mining operation with all proper permits. He gestured to a guard. Please escort this woman off the premises. Not until you hear me out, Sarah insisted, raising her voice as the guard approached. This canyon contains sacred sites, medicine that can't be found anywhere else. Superstitious nonsense. Hargrove dismissed her claims with a wave. There's copper and silver here worth a fortune. Progress doesn't halt for legends and primitive remedies. Outside, a commotion erupted, shouts and the sound of running feet. Sarah silently thanked Nakohi for his perfect timing. What now? Hargrove snapped, moving toward the tent entrance. The distraction gave Sarah precious seconds to scan the tent. There, on a small table near the back, a wooden box with brass fittings. The detonator. But a guard remained stationed beside it, unmoving despite the chaos outside. Hargrove turned back to her, eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion. You're a distraction, he realized. You're working with that Apache, aren't you? Before Sarah could respond, Benson burst into the tent. Sir, the Apache's been spotted near the north blasting site, and someone's tampered with the secondary charges. Arrest her, Hargrove ordered, pointing at Sarah, and send every available man to find that Indian. Nobody disrupts this operation. As guards seized her arms, pain shooting through her wounded limb, Sarah caught sight of Nakohi through the tent opening. Their eyes met briefly, his filled with apology, hers with desperate urgency. Then he disappeared, pursued by armed miners. Mr. Hargrove, Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice steady as they bound her wrists. You destroyed my family once through negligence. I won't let you destroy anything else for profit. Hargrove studied her with cold calculation. Admirable sentiment, Mrs. Whitman. Completely misguided, but admirable. He checked his pocket watch. In exactly 2 hours, this canyon will be transformed for the better. Progress cannot be stopped by one grieving widow and a superstitious savage. As they dragged her from the tent, Sarah's heart sank. The plan had failed. Nakohi was being hunted. The detonator remained intact. And somewhere to the east, Ayana was being brought to a meeting that might never occur. The sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the canyon. Sarah sat bound to a chair outside Hargrove's tent, watched by a single guard while the others continued searching for Nakohi. From her position, she could see miners making final preparations for the blast, now less than an hour away. He won't be caught, she told the guard, hoping it was true. He knows this canyon better than any of you. The guard ignored her, eyes scanning the surrounding terrain nervously. The Apache warrior's elusiveness had clearly unsettled the mining crew. Sarah's thoughts turned to Nakohi. Had he escaped? Had he abandoned their plan to meet Ayana at the rendezvous point? The medicine pouch had been discovered and confiscated when they searched her. Hargrove himself had examined it with dismissive curiosity before tossing it aside in his tent. Miles away, at the eastern edge of the territory, Nakohi crouched behind a rock outcropping. He had evaded his pursuers, but at a cost. A bullet had grazed his side, leaving a painful, bleeding wound. Before him stood 3 Apache warriors, their faces grim as they delivered their message. Ayana breathes poorly, the eldest warrior said in their native tongue. The journey weakened her. She waits beyond that ridge. Nakohi rose, ignoring his pain. Take me to her. The small group moved silently through the scrubland until they reached a makeshift camp. There, on a blanket beneath a canvas shelter, lay Ayana. Her once vibrant beauty was now marked by consumption's cruel hand. Cheeks hollow, skin ashen, each breath a visible struggle. My wife, Nakohi whispered, kneeling beside her. Ayana's eyes fluttered open, recognition bringing a ghost of a smile to her lips. You came, she managed between labored breaths. I promised I would. He took her hand, alarmed at how light and fragile it felt within his own. The medicine? She asked. Nakohi's heart constricted. Taken. By mining men. He quickly explained about Sarah, about their failed plan, about the imminent destruction of the sacred canyon. Ayana listened, her dark eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she surprised him by asking, "This woman, Sarah, she helped you?" "Yes, risked everything. And now she is captive." Ayana's gaze intensified. "Because of me?" "No," Nakohi objected. "Because of mining men. Because of greed." A fit of coughing seized Ayana, flecks of blood appearing on her lips. When it passed, she gripped Nakohi's hand with unexpected strength. "Go to her," she whispered. "I cannot leave you. You must." Her voice gained conviction despite its weakness. "Our people say, honor binds tighter than blood. You gave your word to fight beside her." "My duty is to you," Nakohi insisted. Ayana shook her head slightly. "I have our people around me. She has no one." Another cough racked her body. "The canyon's medicine is for all Apache children to come. Not just for me." The tribal elder who had escorted Nakohi stepped forward, holding out a beautifully crafted headdress, a symbol of tribal acceptance that Nakohi had not worn since his banishment years ago. "The council restored your place among us," the elder explained. "Your efforts to save the sacred canyon have proven your heart true." Nakohi stared at the headdress, emotion threatening to overcome his stoic demeanor. To be accepted again by his people after years of exile was more than he had dared hope for. "Take it," Ayana urged. "Then go. Save the white healer. Save our canyon." Torn between duty to his wife and his promise to Sarah, Nakohi closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, decision had hardened his features. He accepted the headdress, touching it reverently before placing it on his head. "I will return," he promised Ayana, "with medicine." "I know," she whispered, her eyes reflecting a peace that transcended her physical suffering. To the warriors, Nakohi spoke with renewed authority. "For men with me, the rest stay to protect my wife." The elder nodded approval. "It will be done." Back at the mining camp, Sarah watched with growing despair as workers began clearing the area in preparation for detonation. Hargrove emerged from his tent, consulting his pocket watch. 30 minutes, gentlemen," he announced. "Make your final checks." Sarah struggled against her bonds. "You can't do this." Hargrove approached her, expression calculating. "Mrs. Whitman, progress is inevitable. This canyon will provide minerals to build railways, telegraphs, new cities. The future belongs to men who dare to reshape the land." "The land doesn't belong to you," Sarah countered. "It belongs to whoever claims it. Your Apache friend understood that once, when he scouted for the army." Hargrove smiled coldly. Pity he couldn't maintain that progressive viewpoint. A sudden commotion at the camp's perimeter interrupted their exchange, shouts of alarm, followed by the distinctive crack of a rifle shot. Hargrove's head snapped toward the disturbance. "What now?" he demanded. Sarah's heart leapt as a familiar figure appeared on the ridge above the camp, silhouetted against the setting sun. Nakohi stood tall, wearing a ceremonial headdress, flanked by 4 Apache warriors. Behind them, the sky had begun to burn orange and pink, the same colors as the sacred rose gold they had mined together. Chaos erupted in the mining camp. Miners scrambled for weapons while Hargrove shouted contradictory orders, his composed facade cracking. The Apache warriors had positioned themselves strategically around the perimeter, making their small number seem like a much larger force. "Hold your fire," Hargrove commanded as several miners raised their rifles. "We still have the woman." Sarah felt the cold press of metal against her temple as Benson positioned himself behind her chair, revolver drawn. Nakohi's gaze locked with hers across the distance, a silent communication passing between them. "Tell your Apache friend to withdraw," Hargrove called up to the ridge, "or Mrs. Whitman dies before your arrows fly." Instead of retreating, Nakohi raised his hand in a signal. Instantly, the warriors released a volley of arrows, not aimed at the miners, but at the explosive charges positioned around the canyon. Several found their marks, severing detonation lines with surgical precision. The distraction allowed Sarah to act. Throwing her weight sideways, she toppled her chair, causing Benson's shot to go wild. As she hit the ground, still bound, a blur of movement caught her peripheral vision. Nakohi, descending the ridge with impossible speed. What followed seemed to unfold in slow motion. Nakohi engaged 3 miners simultaneously, his movements fluid and precise. The Apache warriors created strategic chaos, disabling equipment and driving miners away from the detonator tent. Within minutes, Nakohi had reached Sarah, cutting her bonds with a quick slice of his knife. "You came back," she gasped, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. "Promise together," he replied simply, helping her to her feet. Their reunion was cut short as Hargrove emerged from his tent, clutching the wooden detonator box. "Stop right there," he shouted, finger hovering over the trigger mechanism. "One more step and I detonate whatever charges remain." Nakohi pushed Sarah behind him protectively. Many lines cut. Blast incomplete. "Enough remain to destroy your precious rose gold deposits," Hargrove snarled. "Now back away, all of you." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Sarah stepped forward, moving deliberately toward Hargrove despite Nakohi's attempt to hold her back. "You took my family from me," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "You won't take anything else. Stay back," Hargrove warned, retreating a step. "Before you press that trigger, there's something you should know." Sarah continued her slow advance. "I sent documentation to the territorial governor yesterday. Details of your illegal operations here. Evidence of bribes to local officials. Proof this land was designated Apache territory in the Treaty of 1868. Uncertainty flickered across Hargrove's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I? I was married to a lawyer, Mr. Hargrove. I know how to prepare a legal case." It was indeed a bluff, but one delivered with such conviction that doubt crept into Hargrove's expression. While Sarah held Hargrove's attention, Nakohi had silently repositioned himself. In one fluid motion, he lunged forward, knocking the detonator from Hargrove's grasp. It skidded across the ground as the 2 men grappled. Hargrove was no match for Nakohi's strength and training. Within moments, he was subdued, his face pressed into the dirt. The remaining miners, seeing their leader captured and the Apache warriors in control of the camp, lowered their weapons. Sarah retrieved the medicine pouch from Hargrove's tent, clutching it like the precious treasure it was. "We need to hurry," she told Nakohi. "Ayana is waiting." A commotion at the camp entrance drew their attention. A group of riders approached, not miners or Apache warriors, but uniformed men led by an official in a formal coat. "United States Territorial Marshal," the lead rider announced, surveying the scene with practiced authority. "What's happening here?" Before anyone could respond, Nakohi stepped forward and presented a folded document. "Apache land," he stated firmly. "By treaty." The marshal examined the document, eyebrows rising. "This appears to be a legitimate land deed recognizing Apache mineral rights to this canyon under the Treaty of 1868. He turned to Hargrove, still restrained. "Sir, your mining permits would be invalid if this deed is authenticated." "Preposterous," Hargrove sputtered. "That can't be genuine." "It bears the territorial governor's seal," the marshal observed. "Where did you obtain this?" he asked Nakohi. "Tribal elders. Kept safe many years." Sarah stared at Nakohi in amazement. This crucial document had never been mentioned in their planning. She realized there were still depths to him she had yet to fathom. The marshal instructed his deputies to secure Hargrove and Benson. "There will be a full investigation into these mining operations and the validity of all permits." To Nakohi, he added, If this deed proves authentic, your people's claim to the canyon will be upheld. As the chaos subsided, Sarah approached Nakohi, eyes questioning. You had legal claim all along? Not certain it would be honored, he explained. White man's papers often forgotten when convenient. The medicine, Sarah remembered suddenly. We need to get it to Ayana. Nakohi nodded, his expression shifting from warrior to concerned husband in an instant. She waits, not strong. A tribal warrior approached, leading Nakohi's horse. Another had been brought for Sarah. As they prepared to depart, a deputy called out from Hargrove's tent. Marshal, you'd better see this. Records of bribes, falsified permits, correspondence about ignoring Apache land claims. The marshal's stern gaze fell on Hargrove. Seems Mrs. Whitman wasn't bluffing after all. As they rode eastward, the setting sun casting the canyon in shades of rose gold, Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions. Triumph, relief, lingering anger, and beneath it all, an uncertainty about what would come next. Beside her, Nakohi rode with single-minded purpose, the medicine pouch secured against his heart. His thoughts clearly with the woman waiting beyond the horizon. 3 months later, the canyon stood serene in autumn sunshine, untouched by dynamite or mining equipment. Sarah walked along a familiar path, her boots crunching on fallen leaves. The arm that had been wounded had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar as a reminder of that desperate night. Ahead, at the entrance to what she still thought of as their cave, Nakohi waited. Beside him stood a slender woman wrapped in a colorful blanket against the morning chill. Ayana, still thin but no longer bearing death's shadow. Her dark eyes held a quiet strength as she greeted Sarah with a gentle embrace. The medicine continues to work, Ayana said, her English careful but clear. Each day stronger. Sarah smiled, genuinely happy to see the improvement in the woman who had shown such selflessness in her darkest hour. The rose gold has powerful medicine indeed. Together the three of them walked to the waterfall where the richest vein of rose gold had been discovered. The canyon had been officially recognized as Apache territory, protected from mining operations by federal decree. Hargrove and several officials faced charges of corruption and fraud, their case becoming something of a sensation in territorial newspapers. Many changes, Nakohi observed as they stood looking out over the canyon. For all of us. Sarah nodded, thinking of her own transformation. After Ayana had received the medicine and begun her slow recovery, Sarah had established a small practice near the reservation, combining her medical training with traditional healing methods learned from both Nakohi and Ayana. The territorial doctor had initially scoffed but grudgingly acknowledged her success with patients who had previously refused Western treatment. I never reached Tucson, she said with a small laugh. Somehow the destination changed along the way. Ayana knelt by a small patch of freshly turned earth near the waterfall. From a pouch at her waist, she withdrew several tiny fragments of rose gold. Planting for future, she explained, carefully placing the pieces into the soil. Old ones taught that rose gold can grow like seeds if returned to sacred ground with proper prayers. Sarah watched, fascinated, as Nakohi joined his wife in the ritual, their hands working in practiced unison. She had seen enough of the canyon's magic to neither believe nor disbelieve such a possibility. When they finished, Ayana stepped back, studying Sarah with perceptive eyes. You have given much to people not your own, she said. Why stay? The question was asked without judgment, a genuine curiosity about the white woman who had abandoned her journey to remain in this place between worlds. I found something here I thought I'd lost forever, Sarah answered honestly. Purpose, healing, connection. Her eyes met Nakohi's briefly before returning to Ayana. I'm not sure I can explain it better than that. Ayana nodded, seeming to understand more than Sarah had articulated. Canyon brings what is needed, she said, echoing Nakohi's words from months earlier. As they walked back toward the settlement, Sarah noticed the easy way Nakohi and Ayana moved together. Two halves of a whole, reunited after staring into the abyss of separation. She felt a complex emotion that wasn't quite envy, but rather appreciation for the deep bond they shared. The school needs a teacher, Ayana said suddenly. Children wish to learn English numbers. Tribal council would welcome you. Sarah looked at her in surprise. Me? Teaching Apache children? Who better? Nakohi asked. You bridge two worlds. Like rose gold, part of earth, part of sky. The metaphor touched Sarah deeply. She had come west seeking escape, a new beginning far from painful memories. Instead, she had found not just a new life but a transformative one, becoming a bridge between cultures, between traditional and modern medicine, between past wounds and future healing. I would be honored, she said finally. As the sun reached its zenith, casting the canyon in brilliant light, Sarah thought of the moment she had first stumbled upon Nakohi mining rose gold with his bare hands. How his scarred fingers had extracted something precious from unyielding stone. How she, too, had found unexpected treasure in the midst of loss. Ahead lay uncertainty, cultural differences to navigate, old prejudices to overcome. But looking at the planted rose gold seeds, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since before the Chicago fire. Hope taking root, fragile but persistent, reaching toward the light. The canyon had brought what was needed, not just for Ayana's healing or the preservation of sacred land, but for Sarah's wounded spirit as well. Different paths had converged here, transformed each other, and now continued forward, separate yet connected, like veins of rose gold running through ancient stone.